Hello, folks. Sean Mize here for our faith-based training call today. And we're going to be talking just a little bit about preparing for the future and preparing for possible famine or economic unrest or economic famine as that relates to not necessarily just as it relates to being an entrepreneur. Obviously, that's the frame in which we have these discussions. But I want to share with you a few instances in the Word of God where disaster or famine or economic uncertainty was planned for. And let's see if we can pick up some patterns that are involved. So, Father, we come before you. We thank you for this opportunity to take some time out of the middle of our day and dig into what your Word says about things that affect us in our entrepreneurial work and the work that we do. I ask that you'll give me wisdom in what I share, and that you'll enlighten the ears and the minds of those that are here as well. We pray in Christ's name, thankfully. Amen. But let's start with Joseph. So Joseph, of course, was imprisoned. This is Genesis chapter 41, verses 28 through 36. So Genesis 41, we'll start in verse 28. So we won't do a whole lot of background on any of these cases because we want to go through three different use cases of preparing. But the long story is Joseph, of course, was imprisoned. He was taken from his land, and he was taken in the land of Egypt, and he was a servant in the house of Potiphar. The lady of the house told lies on him, and he was placed in prison for what I believe at this point was several years at this time. And he had done good by the Lord. He'd done good by the people. He'd been made keeper of the prisoners at some point. He had foretold some dreams for, I think it was the butler and the butcher that had been in prison with them. One of those dreams said that the man would be dead, I think it was the next day, and the other said the person would live. When the Pharaoh at the time had a very, very, very interesting dream, he inquired of his wise people and couldn't get a good answer, and was finally led to Joseph as somebody that would be able to interpret dreams. And so if we look at Genesis chapter 41, it came to pass at the end of 2 full years, this is 2 full years after he had asked the butler and the butcher that when they got out that they would let the Pharaoh know that Joseph was a good guy. They obviously didn't. Pharaoh dreamed, and he stood by the river, and behold, there came up out of the river 7 well-favored kine and fat flesh, and they fed in the meadow. And behold, 7 other kine came up after them out of the river, ill-favored and lean-fleshed, and stood by the other kine from the brink of the river. And the ill-favored and lean-fleshed kine did eat up the 7 well-favored and fat kine. So Pharaoh awoke. And there was a second dream, verse 5, and he slept and dreamed the second time. And behold, 7 ears of corn came up upon one stalk, rank and good. And behold, 7 thin ears and blasted with the east wing, wind sprung up after them. And the 7 thin ears devoured the 7 rank and full ears. And Pharaoh woke, and behold, it was a dream. So at this point in the Word, it kind of talks about what I shared with you a moment ago. He asks his wise men what's the answer to the dream, and none of them knew. He called for Joseph. Joseph then says, and this is beginning in verse 28, so Genesis 48:28, this is the thing which I have spoken unto Pharaoh, what God is about to do, he showeth unto Pharaoh. Behold, there come 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt. There shall arise after them 7 years of famine, and all the plenty shall be forgotten in the land of Egypt, and the famine shall consume the land. And the plenty shall not be known in the land by reason of that famine following, for it shall be very grievous. And so that the dream was doubled unto Pharaoh twice. It is because of this thing, because this thing is established by God, and God will shortly bring it to pass. Now therefore let Pharaoh look out a man discreet and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint officers over the land, and take up the 5th part of the land of Egypt in 7 plenteous years. Let them gather all the food of those good years that come, and lay up corn under the hand of Pharaoh, and let them keep food in the cities. And that food shall be for store to the land against the 7 years of famine, which shall be in the land of Egypt, that the land perish not through the famine. And so, we know historically that Pharaoh chose to elevate Joseph to the second in the land, second only unto him, because he was so wise and was able to interpret the dreams, that he would be kind of the taskmaster of putting the food away. If we look at this as a type of preparing for the future, part of preparing for the future is putting away. It is steps, and not just putting away, but the steps to being prepared. What needs to be in place in order to get through the next season? You know, we could be philosophical and talk about this on many different fronts. You know, in every part of our life, there's a preparation to go into the next season, whatever that is. If you're getting a new job, if you're creating a new business, if you're moving to the next level in some way, you know, whatever the case is, there's a preparation that has to happen, and that may, in this case, be storing up a fifth of the land for that future time. That there's a preparation that has to happen, or that should happen, when we know that something's going to happen into the future. If we look at Hebrews 11:7, and this is a reflection on what happened with Noah. So if we know the story of Noah prior to the story of Joseph, prior to the time of Joseph, you know, Noah was alerted by God that there was going to be a flood. And God told him 100 years in advance there was going to be a flood. He told him how to build a boat. And, you know, one of the things that's interesting about that situation is when Noah was told to build a boat, he didn't know what the boat really was. You know, the presumption was there wasn't water at that time. There weren't any lakes or anything like that. So he'd never seen a boat. So he simply had to take the directions, make the best of it that he could, ask the Lord, am I doing this thing right? And when it started raining, then the boat actually floated. What's interesting, the word says, this is Hebrews chapter 11, verse 7, by faith Noah, being warned of God of things not seen as yet, moved with fear, prepared an ark to the saving of his house, by the which he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness which is by faith. Now, obviously, you know, the thing that I don't know that applies as much to us is the rest of this verse where it says that he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness which is by faith. So Noah was obviously in the bloodline of everybody that followed after. And so he became an heir of the righteousness which is by faith, not just through that bloodline, but he had faith. He had faith, not just the bloodline, but he became an heir of the righteousness, which is by faith. He was able to be placed into this hall of fame because of the faith that he had. He was warned of God. The Pharaoh was warned of God through the dream, and then Joseph interpreted. Noah was warned by God very specifically about what was going to happen. I think that we are in an unusual time where, whether you have felt warned by God or not, common sense would tell us that we don't know what's going to happen over the next 3 months to 2 years. So certainly coming into this crisis, we didn't know what would happen. And of course, our first response is fear. Our first response is really being aghast at a stay-at-home order. You know, it's just not modern. It feels draconian in nature, even though our stay-at-home orders, our shelter-in-place orders, were not nearly as draconian as in some places. But what happened there was a fear of the unknown, and really a fear of the disease, probably a greater fear of the disease then when it was unknown as it is now when it is ravaging at a pretty amazing rate. But I believe that times have changed so that we are getting to the place, I believe that times have changed such that we're getting to the place where we're actually beginning to feel some stability. So instead of having a feeling of uncertainty, and instead of having a feeling of great fear, we're developing a feeling of stability, of simply dealing with what it looks like it is right now. However, if we look at things wisely, and we look deeper than just the virus itself, and we look at a possible economic slowdown. On one hand, we can look at a possible economic slowdown from the perspective that everything slows down. Everything right now feels like it's slowed down a little bit. Spending is down, and the stocks are down, housing prices are down a little, and consumer spending is down a little bit. People aren't working quite as much, and it doesn't feel like a big deal, and it may not be a big deal. I want to go back to Joseph and Noah. Joseph had a special ability. Joseph had a special ability to interpret and understand dreams. He had a special ability. Noah was given special knowledge that it was going to happen, and he was given special knowledge on how to prepare. So that Noah and Joseph were uniquely positioned to be the people that could bring their community. So in Noah, his family, with Joseph, really the entire country of Egypt, out of that disaster. Now, for those of you that are here, I see you as being a very entrepreneurial audience. Being invited here, you're an entrepreneurial audience. In some ways, you have a special insight, maybe not from God the way that Joseph and Noah did, although maybe you have. But you have a special insight because you're able to look at the past. You have a special skill, kind of like Joseph. You have skills that translate well online. When we look at so much of the slowdowns in the economy, so much of them are tied to physical presence because we don't spread the virus through the internet. And so without getting too business oriented here, because I really want to keep this focused on a spiritual approach, but I believe that the Lord gives us a spiritual approach to deal with things that happen in our physical world. You are uniquely positioned in terms of having online skills that most people don't have. Just like Joseph didn't have just like most people didn't have Joseph's special skill of being able to interpret a dream, or the skill of being able to understand what God was saying so that he could. Noah, most people did not have the knowledge to be able to try to build an ark, but Noah did. When I look at you, I feel like you have a knowledge to be able to grow and to build things online like other people can't. Now, it's easy to look around and say, well, there's another million people online that can do what I do, therefore I'm not special. Because you're comparing yourself with the other million people that know. What you don't know is that there's 8 billion people in the world, 7.9 billion of them, which if I think of my math correctly, that's 7,900 million people don't know how to do what you know how to do online. Now, Hebrews 11:7 says that by faith Noah, being warned of God of things not yet seen, moved with fear, he prepared an ark to the saving of his house. What can you prepare for the saving of your house? You see, when coronavirus came upon us and all the devastation that it wreaked, not just physically, but probably more so economically and emotionally, you weren't forewarned. Most people were not. I think that there were a few prophets that had prophesied some things along this nature that would happen in February or March. Okay? But for the most part, I don't think most of us knew about that. I didn't. I think most people did not. We weren't prepared for coronavirus. We weren't prepared for the fear and the uncertainty because it came so quickly. This next season is not coming quickly, although at some point, if it tips, it may happen quickly. But it's not upon us yet. There is time to prepare. And so I want to cross the bridge now between the spiritual and the earthly and say that what if because of your knowledge, you are somehow being forewarned through a collection of things, through me, through the Lord speaking through me or through other people, the Lord directly to you, or any other way that you're perceiving it. What if you are being warned to prepare your ark to the saving of your house? You see, you have a set of skills online that not many people have. And that people are actually in pretty great demand of those skills right now. So many people are coming online now. They need help with the basics. They need help to build an email list. They need help to make an opt-in page. They need help to format a PDF. They need help to build a course. They need help to go online. They need help to use Zoom. They need help to do all those things. And I don't think that's going away. It may begin to back off at some point. I don't believe that's going to go away in the next 3 to 6 months. 3 to 6 years, maybe. I don't think the next 3 to 6 months that goes away. But we're seeing continuing to see this, that people are still home more. They're not able to participate socially as more. So it seems like people are doing more hobbies and need more learning, and they're buying more training for hobbies, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm really talking more about the skills. What if you are being warned? And what if it's time for you to move with fear to prepare your ark to the saving of your house? You see, maybe you've been studying something and knowing how to do it, and you've known how to do it now for a year or 2 or 3, but there's never been any urgency. And so without that urgency, it's been more difficult to take action. Building an online business is a luxury when you have a perfectly good full-time business, but you just want to quit because you don't like your boss. But if you knew that in the next 90 days you'd lose your job, I don't want to say that for anybody. I hope that doesn't happen. But if you knew that was going to happen, or if you knew that was possible, would it be possible to shift from whatever wheel spinning that may have been happening or studying that's been going on over the last 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever it is, to saying, wait a second, like Noah, I have a few months to get prepared. Is it time to begin building a network? Is it time to begin building a collaboration? Is it time to pull the trigger on whatever it is that you teach? And maybe I'm belaboring this issue a little bit more than I should be. My intent with sharing this with you was very much mostly just the spiritual, and that you make most of the connections. So I've given you the connection, and I'm going to back off of that now. I want to move to a different way of attacking disaster. So both of the situations that we've seen, Joseph and Noah, are situations where there's preparation for the disaster that's going to occur. Look at Genesis chapter 26, verse 1. Genesis 26, verse 1. Now this is a situation, okay, where there was a famine. There was a famine. And let's just read the Genesis 26:1. There's a famine in the land beside the first famine that was in the days of Abraham. And Isaac went unto Abimelech, king of the Philistines, unto Gerar. And this is a famine that Isaac was involved in. Now I'm going to skip reading the story of what's happening. Isaac moved him and his wife and probably servants, et cetera, to the land of Gerar, so that he could have perhaps, I don't know that it was so much to avoid the famine, but to go somewhere else. the Lord had given him some direction to get there. And I want to fast forward then. So we have this famine. I'm going to fast forward to verse 12. So this is a land in which there is famine. Many times when there's famine, many times when there's loss, we don't want to plant into that loss. So once again, kind of connecting it to where you may be right now. You're experiencing perhaps loss over the fact that you've worked really hard online but don't have anything to show for it. You've created 3/4 of a training program before but didn't finish it. You've written sales letters but didn't finish them. You've done different things. And by the way, I put my hand up too. Right? Plenty of unfinished things on my hard drives that are not finished. And some because I've ran out of steam, some because I don't believe in them anymore, some because I'm just plain old lazy, and some because you get 3/4 through something and you go, wow, this is really good training, so you walk away from it. But maybe if you're at that place where you're looking at the last 3 years and you're saying, wow, what a loss. This is a famine, and not only is it a famine, but things are going to get worse. Things are going to get worse. So I have a famine. I have a hard drive full of stuff I can't use. I spent a lot of money on training. I have nothing to show for it. And things are going to get worse. So why do anything? Isaac, verse 12, Genesis 27:12, says, then Isaac sowed in that land, okay, the famine land, the land of famine, and received in the same year 100-fold, and the Lord blessed him. And the man waxed great and went forward and grew until he became very great, for he had possession of flocks and possession of herds and great store of servants, and the Philistines envied him for all the wells which his father servant had digged in the days of Abraham his father. The Philistines had stopped him and filled it with doors. So I had not intended to read that last verse, but really it gets to the place where all things are as a cycle. So he starts out in the famine, he sows in the land, he receives 100-fold blessing. The man waxed great and went forward and grew until he became very great. So my belief there is that if he grew, he had a 100-fold harvest. Next year, maybe he had a 30-fold harvest. Next year, maybe a 60-fold harvest. Maybe he had a bad year, a 2-fold harvest. He had an 8-fold harvest. But when you add up all those numbers, he waxed great and he went forward and grew. He grew to the place where the people around him didn't like him anymore, and they stopped up all his wells to try to stop him. And he did. He left. He ended up leaving. But I would imagine when he left with great wealth. Now, I want to talk about perspective here for just a moment. I suspect that for some of you, you're looking at the last 3 years or 2 years, 1 year, 5 years, whatever it is, as some loss. You've been in a famine in this internet business, and maybe you're even backing off. Imagine if Isaac had backed off in that year of famine. He might have died. Him and his wife, they might have died during that year of famine, but he didn't back off. He planted. What if your next step is to plant into this economic uncertainty, to plant into your loss? Is it possible that the skills that you thought would never be used are actually going to be used by God in your life to the saving of your household, to the saving of your family? Is it possible that some of the people that are coming onto the internet right now without you are going to be scammed? Scams are up huge right now because, think about this. An unsuspecting person comes online and types in how to start an online course, and they land on an evil person's website that sells lies instead of truth about how to start an online course and teaches them how to do it all wrong and charges them money for it. That'd be a pretty bad thing. You hold the keys to doing it right. How many people can you save from disaster? Just like Noah was able to save his family from disaster, he was able to save future generations from disaster. How many can you save from disaster? By being willing to plant into your land. Let's talk about planting into your land. What does that look like? And I think for different people it might look differently. You know, if you've never created a course, maybe that's where you've got to plant. Maybe you have a course, you thought about getting a course, but you don't have an email list. Maybe that's where you need to plant. Maybe you have a small email list, you have a small course, but you're really not doing anything in the world to attract people. You know, you're not doing interviews. You're not active on social media. You're not active with the videos. You're not active with your inbox. Whatever it is, wherever it is. You're not collaborating with other folks. Maybe that's where you've got to sow in. Maybe that's where you have to plant in, literally hunting down to find people that need your help and offering help. You know, and part of that process of offering help might be free help. It might be consulting. It might be a workshop. It might be something that you charge for. But what if now is your time to sow? You see, when we think about biblical times, or we think about times now, not just biblical times, but we think about times now, there's a time to plant, there's a time to sow. Solomon, of course, talked about that in Ecclesiastes, but we see that in our own cycles. There's a time to plant wheat, and then 90 or 100 days later, then we reap that wheat. So there's time to plant, there's time to sow, and then there's time for harvest. What if right now is planting time? Right now is sowing time. And in 3 months or 6 months, the world around us is in famine. But because you have planted into this season, you are prepared and possibly blessed by God to have a harvest when other people are not able to reap a harvest because they didn't plant. Think about this. There are many who will not plant into this season because of the doom that they see. But if you go against that and you plant into the famine, much as Isaac did. Let me give you one more example, and then we'll wrap up quickly. This is 2 Kings. Let's find it. So 2 Kings, we'll go to about chapter 7. Maybe we'll go to chapter 6, verse 24. So Ben-Hadad, king of Syria, had gathered up his army and went up and besieged Samaria. So there was a great famine in Samaria. Things were going very, very poorly. If you read what happened, I mean, things are just going very, very poorly. People are eating their children. They're selling dove poop for 5 pieces of silver. I mean, they're afraid that they're going to die. And of course, Elisha the prophet comes on and he says, "Hear the word of the Lord. Thus saith the Lord, tomorrow about this time shall a measure of fine flour be sold for a shekel, and 2 measures of barley for a shekel in the gate of Samaria." And basically, what it's saying is that barley and wheat and everything is just going to be dirt cheap again. Everything's going to change. And there's a bit of a story there as well. I won't get into it. I want to fast forward to 4 lepers, 4 leprous men that were sitting at the entering in of the gate. They are outside of the gate. They're outside of the gate because they're lepers. They're not allowed to be in, sort of like they're under quarantine. They're going hungry too. They're going hungry too. I don't know if they've heard the prophecy. I don't know that it's relevant. They start reasoning through this thing. So verse 4, or verse 3, they say, "Why do we sit here until we die?" Verse 4, if we say we will enter the city, then the famine's in the city, we'll die there, right? Lack of food. And let us therefore come and let us fall unto the host of the Syrians. If they save us alive, we'll live. And if they kill us, we'll die. We'll only but die. If we stay here outside the gate, we're going to die. If we go into the city, there's a famine, we're going to die. If we go to the camp of the Syrians and they kill us, then we die. So our worst case scenario in all cases is we die. They go through this logically. So now they decide, okay, tomorrow we're going to rise up. We're going to rise up at twilight, early dawn. They go to the camp of the Syrians. The interesting thing is, and of course this is where Elisha's prophecy really ties in. When they get there, they came to the uttermost parts of the camp of Syria. There was nobody there, because the Lord had made the host of the Syrians to hear a noise of chariots and a noise of horses. even the noise of a great host. And they said one to another, Lo, the king of Israel has hired us against the kings of the Hittites and the kings of the Egyptians to come upon us. So they arose and they fled in the twilight. They left their tents and their horses, their asses. They left their camp as it was and fled for their life. So when those lepers, they had logically made this decision: if we go into the city, we're going to die. If we stay outside the city, we're going to die. And if we go talk to the host of the Syrians and they kill us, we're going to die. So what our best odds are, let's go talk to the army, right? But what they didn't know was that a prophecy had already been sent forth that said that tomorrow the drought would be over. They didn't know that. Now think about this. If both of these parts happened, would the famine not have happened? Both parts would the famine have not been broken. If Elisha had not prophesied that the famine would be broken, would it have become broken? And if the lepers had not gone through this mental reasoning, would the famine have been broken? So a little bit of a conundrum to think through. Verse 8, so this is 2 Kings 7, verse 8. When those lepers came to the uttermost part of the camp, they went into one tent and they ate and drank. This is a famine. They ate and they drank. Then they carried silver and gold and clothing and they hid it. And they came again and they entered another tent and they carried that away and they hid it. So think about this. During the time that they are eating and drinking and ravishing the silver, the gold, and the clothing and hiding it somewhere, maybe in their camp outside of the gates, the people inside of the gates are in famine. They may be dying today, even as the lepers are doing this. So finally, they go, well, wait a second. They said one to another, this isn't right. We do not do well. This day is a day of good tidings. And if we hold our peace, if we tarry till the morning light, some mischief will come upon us. Now let therefore go that we may go and tell the king's household. And you probably know the rest of the story. He goes in, they say, he comes to the king's household, Samaria, and he says, look, we entered the camp, they're all gone. And sure enough, the next day, the famine was broken. Now, let's think about this from your perspective. Maybe you're like one of the lepers. Maybe the famine or some part of the famine is going to be broken. Maybe it's been prophesied to be broken. You're one of the lepers going through some mental calculation. I don't know what your calculation might be, but it could be like, well, if I sit back and I do nothing, then I'm not going to be able to take care of my family. If I try to fight for it, maybe there's nothing. And I'm just making these options up. But maybe the third option is, what if I go out there and I actually go into the enemy's camp? And what is the enemy's camp with this? Depending on how you structure this, if the enemy is behind economic destruction, what would be the enemy's plan? The enemy's plan would be for everybody to fail, yes? But now you have this specialized knowledge. And just like once the lepers got into the new area, they had specialized knowledge. Just like Noah had specialized knowledge on how to build the boat. Joseph had specialized knowledge on interpreting dreams. Now, he was expecting God to give him the answer right then, but let's face it, God doesn't just give anybody an answer to dreams. So Joseph had some level of access to specialized knowledge. What access to specialized knowledge do you have that can help other people get through the famine? I ain't intended to go here, but the thought becomes real to me that says, do you not have a responsibility to help others get through the famine? I mean, think about me here. I was thinking about this in the last maybe even 24 hours. These concepts of what could happen over the course of the next 90 days have, been thinking about it over the course of the last few days. And I'm kind of like the lepers. I'm kind of like, I have an opportunity to shed the light on, let's just say, how to build a coaching business or course business, because, of course, that's where my expertise lies, yeah. But what if I do nothing? So what if I know where the silver and gold is hidden, and I really believe the silver and gold is online right now. So I know where the silver and gold is hidden, and I do nothing. then I'm like the lepers, do not do well. This day is a good day of good tidings if we hold our peace. If I hold my peace, if I tarry till it's over, some mischief will come upon me. Now, I don't plan to be doomsday for the next 90 days. Absolutely not. This is in and out. This may be one and done. This may be today. This may be today's message. And we're all forewarned. I want to submit to you that I believe that the next 90 days, much as Joseph had 7 years to prepare the land of Egypt, Noah had 100 years to build his ark. This famine had been going on for, without spending too much time looking for it, I think it was 2 or 3 years. 2 or 3 year long famine, I think, right? I plan to spend my next 90 days preparing for the next 2 years. Now, I believe, and I don't have passages for this, I don't have references, so I've given you all the Bible, right? I'm going to get into a little bit of my own opinion. I believe that the recovery from this disaster, that there is a unique and special blessing for those that follow Christ wholeheartedly through and out of this. Okay? There is a shaking in the physical world. There is a shaking in the earthly world. There's a shaking in the spiritual world right now. And I believe that some of that shaking is shaking the bad out. I believe that some of that shaking is purging some of the bad. I mean, that's not going to go away on its own. You may have even experienced areas in your life where with the slowdown, it's easy to say, I'm not spending the time with the Lord. I need to make these adjustments. Maybe he's given you business adjustments to make. And so you know that personally. But let me ask you this. If you've made those adjustments in your personal life, if you've made those adjustments in your business, if you've made your thinking adjustments based on the Lord giving you a nudging, then what if those folks who don't have the Lord giving them a nudging don't take the nudge? I believe that we are entering a time period, we probably already have entered it, where those of us who will try to listen, okay, as hard as that is, but let's just say that are following the Lord, we're expecting him to direct our steps. We may not know where that step's going to be, but we put our foot in the water, we put our foot in the brook, and we just expect that when we put our foot in, he's going to move mountains, right? That you will have an advantage if you're following him and doing this. Much of the world is going to go into disaster. And by the way, if you do nothing, nothing will be special, right? So if you do nothing and you lose your job, or the breadwinner in your family loses their job, and you have this skill that you've developed for 3 years, you've spent some of the family's earnings the last 3 years to learn how to do this job, but you've never been able to really just pull the trigger and make sales. All right, you have all the head knowledge, but you're not doing it yet. And I know it can be done because when I started, this probably doesn't belong here, but one sentence. When I started, I had very little head knowledge, but I was just determined to make sales. So I just started studying. What do I have to do to make a sale? And, you know, initially I just found some good products that other people had, and I studied them, and I said, well, this is good training. This will teach you how to do this. And I'd tell people about it. And the folks that I was promoting for would send me a few bucks. A couple months later, I said, wait a second. I can teach this stuff now. I'll write my own training. And so I wrote it. I learned how to write a little tiny sales letter. It's pretty horrible. And I put it out there, and people started spending money. I didn't know very much. You probably know 10 times more than I knew back then. And maybe even that knowledge is holding you back from pulling the trigger. I think just like Noah could have been held back because everybody was going to laugh at him, just like Joseph could have been held back because he could have been bitter. He could have been bitter. I've been in this jail for 2 more years, and Pharaoh, you didn't come to me and get me out. You know what, Pharaoh, you left me in here for 2 years. I'm not answering your dream. No way. But if Joseph hadn't answered Pharaoh's dream, Joseph would have been in the famine. But instead, Joseph had a good attitude. If I remember correctly, the word says that the prison keepers woke Joseph up early in the morning, and they gave him a way to shave and shower. He got to shave and shower. He put his oils on and make him look good for the Pharaoh. He wasn't bitter over the last 2 years. He went to Pharaoh and he said, Pharaoh, only by God am I going to be able to give you this. It's not me, but God's going to give the interpretation. Now tell me your dream. What if that's you right now? What if you've been studying the internet for a time such as this? What if you've been studying the internet for a time such as this? Remember the story of Esther. Okay, Esther's nephew, her uncle, Esther's uncle, when there was a plot against the Jews, and Esther was, of course, in the I want to say the Babylonian king's presence, that she was a little hesitant, maybe a Persian king, no theologian am I, maybe a Persian king's presence, and she was hesitant to bring the situation up to the king. She's afraid he would kill her, just like with these lepers. And her uncle says to Esther, what if you were born for such a time as this? What if you were born to save the Jews? So let me ask you this. What if you've been studying these principles online for the last 3 years for such a time as this? Just like Joseph had such a time as this, what if Noah was created for such a time as making that ark? And what if the lepers were there for just such a time as that to make Elisha's prophecy come true? What if they didn't take action? What about you? What about me? What if we were prepared for such a time as this? I've been frustrated with some things online over the course of the last few months. I don't think there's a single online business that hasn't been touched by this. You know, and you hear some of the success stories. What you don't see is the people that have gone out of business. You don't see them. They're just not around anymore. There's no fanfare or anything like that. I've had to test a few different things, and I found some things that don't work during these times. I found some things that work really well during these times, and I'm putting as much human effort as I can right now and doubling down on those things. And I'm putting as much human effort as I can in doubling down on teaching you those things. What if we're all here for just such a time as this? What if 100 of you or 1,000 of you were to take that knowledge from the last 2 or 3 years and perhaps collaborate, perhaps bring other people into collaboration? What if you were born for such a time as this? What if the last 3 years of you being driven to learn things online but not being able to pull the trigger is such a time as this? I want to read another verse with you, and then I want to wrap things up. You know I'm going to give you a directive. Proverbs 22:3. Could someone look up for me the verse the Lord left in Proverbs or even Psalms, the Lord directing our steps, and just pop that into the chat, because I want to use it and I want to quote it appropriately. But Proverbs 22:3 for right now. A prudent man foreseeth the evil and hideth himself, but the simple pass on and are punished. This verse really goes along with the preparation, Joseph and Noah. Okay, a prudent man, he's able to kind of see what's getting ready to happen and hide himself and prepare. Okay. obviously the simple pass on and are punished. I want to address that. What if Joseph had passed on? What if he had just passed on? He'd never become the second ruler in Egypt. What if Noah had passed on? They're like, God, really? You want me to build a boat out here with all these people laughing at me? You serious, God? I'm 50 years into this and I don't see any water. I'm done. Walk away. What would have happened? So here's the question for you. Proverbs 5 and 6. Yep, 5, 6. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Let's start there. 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart. Lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. What if you see, you're a unique and a select group of people that are here on this call today. The truth of the matter is, I could have shared some of what I'm sharing right here, and I have shared some of it, full disclosure, and you know this, on some other calls. But the depth of connecting it with history, the depth of connecting it with such a time as this, I haven't shared anywhere else. And a lot of people aren't here because they don't come to this faith-based call, because the faith-based call calls things what it is. We talk about following Christ. So a lot of people don't come here. This is a small group. There'll be fewer views of this than anything else that I produce today. Well, depending on where everything's posted, but if it's all posted in the same place, it'd be fewer. Total net should be fewer views of this than anything else. If what I'm sharing is resonating with you, I just submit to you, spend some time with the Lord. I mean, don't just take me saying, hey, you've been spending 3 years studying this, now go hang out a shingle. I don't want to see that. I don't want anybody to hang out a shingle because of what we just talked about. But take this to the Lord. Ask him, am I like a Joseph? Am I like the lepers? Am I like a Noah? Am I like Isaac? Am I supposed to plant into this? Maybe you're supposed to do it all. Maybe you're supposed to plant into this. Maybe you're going to plant based on your knowledge. Maybe you've got to get more knowledge. Maybe you've got to collaborate with more people. Maybe you've got to learn to pull the trigger. Maybe you've got to have enough courage to just write the sales letter. Maybe that's the only thing that's holding you back. You can teach, but you don't have the courage to say, look, I'm teaching in class. I don't know what it is for you, but I encourage you to take this situation to the Lord and find out where you fit in. That's what I'm doing. And folks, I don't have clear answers. 2 months ago, I thought it was something else. 2 months ago, I thought it was something else. And I'm not going to stop. But Noah didn't stop for 100 years. You think it really took 100 years to build that boat? I don't. I think Noah made some mistakes building that boat, and that's why it took so long. I think Noah made some mistakes building that boat. He did the pitch wrong, and God told him to rip it apart and put it in again. He made some of the beams the wrong length, and so he had to rip them out. He didn't protect them correctly, and they rotted. 100 years, they might have rotted right there. He might have let termites get into one part of the project, and he had to do it over again. The Word does tell us, though, that if we'll acknowledge him in all of our ways, we'll just trust the Lord in our heart, we lean not on our own understanding, we're begging him for direction, that he'll direct our paths, that he'll direct them. The Word says somewhere else that we may fall down 7 times when the Lord is directing us, that he'll just keep picking us up. We may fall down 7 times while he is directing us, and he'll just keep picking us up. Are you willing to fall down 7 times so that you can be picked up 7 times? Because you know what? This may require that you fall down 7 times. Your heart might be quickened right now to do something, but it's not the answer. It's, as a pastor friend of mine said a few weeks ago, that the next thing is the key to the next thing. The Lord may have you do something that's a key, and 2 weeks later he gives you something else that's a key to the next step, and 2 weeks later he gives you something else, and it's a key to the next step. But what if all of this is about being such a time as this, that you are here, just like Noah Hebrews 11:7. I'll close with this. Hebrews 11:7. And notice that Hebrews says that he was moved with fear. What if you are moved with fear? My entire day today, all my teaching, I think this is my 4th training today, different topics related though, has been my fear that I don't share this with you and that 90 days from now, you're worse off. When I believe in my heart that this is, I'm going to use a word that I got in lots of trouble for at the very beginning of this, but I'm going to use it. Just like Isaac took advantage of the famine to sow maybe when nobody else was and had a 100-fold return, I believe that you can sow into whatever's getting ready to happen. There's an incredible demand in certain corners of the market where nobody is sowing right now. You can sow into those areas. Maybe the Lord is giving you something to sow into, but maybe He only is going to give it to you for 2 weeks so you can learn a skill, and then He'll give you something else. He'll take it away and give you something else because He's got to grow you up to the next level, possibly. What if the only reason I've been doing these faith-based calls for the last 7 years is so that I could be able to do this? Because remember, these faith-based calls were telecalls, no video for the longest time, right? And then when I started doing the Zoom calls, think about that, it was always PowerPoint. I never would have dreamed of doing a live call like this. I'm not fond of a talking head video. I've talked against them. I don't buy into it. I don't believe it up until the last 3 months. Now there's no other way to do it. There's no other way to build the kind of trust that we can, which is looking right into your eyes. Why? Because we don't have the physicality anymore, right? So what if the things that the Lord has been giving me to do, the faith-based call, learning how to write a sales letter, learning how to make a video, learning how to upload, learning how to do WordPress, learning how to do various different things, learning how to use Zoom, learning how to do this, learning how to share thoughts with people in such a way that I can have a call to action at the end that folks really want to move forward with. What if every one of those 100 steps that I've taken, none of them are the end in themselves, but they are all in preparation for 90 days from now? And now I'll say it for you. It's not just about me. I may be the model for you. I may be the model or the forerunner for you in this situation. But I believe there's things that you've been preparing for these last 2 or 3 years, and it's time for you to move forward. And, Cynthia highlights that model, and so I'm gonna something popped into my mind. Sometimes you focus so much on what I say and not what I do. And I will never, Lord help me, I will never tell you to do something that I don't believe is the right thing to do or that I wouldn't do in a certain circumstance. But I still might do things I haven't talked about, right? I might do things before I tell you about them because I'm testing them. I like to get the info out to you as fast as possible, but sometimes I just can't. But maybe part of your learning process is watching what I do. It doesn't have to be what I say. Maybe it's watching what I do. Maybe it's watching what I do and coming to a call and asking, why are you doing it? Did it work? Did it fail? A lot of what I do fails. That's why I never talk about it. Fails. You can find out that it fails. Hebrews 11:7, by faith, Noah, being warned of God, consider yourself forewarned, by God or by not, of things not seen as yet. It's not seen yet. Moves with fear. I move with fear today to share this with you. Less 90 days from now, I am condemned for making it out of this alive, and you couldn't because I didn't share the answer. Prepared an ark to the saving of his house. What if your next step is to prepare an ark to the saving of your house? We'll close there.